Association's Expert Exchange, where we address real questions with expert answers. My name is Morgan Taylor. I'm the editor of Abode magazine here at HAA, and as always, I'm your moderator. Today, I'm really excited to announce that we have a new host. She is a vice president at large for the Houston Apartment Association. Please join me in virtually welcoming Tracie Yoder.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracie. She is a vice president of operations at Barvin. And today is Wednesday, April 28th. Today's topic is on leasing, titled The New Apartment Tour. Before I turn it over to our host, I'm going to review some housekeeping items. This series is designed to offer quick 30-minute sessions, but we will stay on as long as necessary to answer all of your questions. You may ask your questions in the Zoom chat box. And if you can't stay on for long, you can find the session on our YouTube channel, HAA TV, later today. Once we answer all the questions we curated, we will get to your questions. A reminder, we are shifting to once a month starting in May. So the next expert exchange will be on Wednesday, May 19th, where we will interview Fidus Construction on construction trends. All right, a quick disclaimer, and then we're gonna get into the session today. We are not public health experts nor attorneys. This webinar is provided for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal or professional advice. No member should act on the basis of any material contained in the webinar without obtaining proper legal or other professional advice specific to their situation. Please consult with your management company or property owner to address specific issues and to form your own company guidelines. With that, I'll turn it over to our host, Tracie Yoder.
Great, thank you, Morgan. And Morgan said, my name is Tracie Yoder. I'm a 2021 Vice President at Large with HAA, and I'm very excited to be the new host. Our expert today is Lana Pistono with Yardi, and we're very, very excited to have her as our expert exchange, and glad that you guys took the time to be with us today. I want to tell you a little bit about Lana's background. She's a regional sales director for Yardi, where she has worked for 10 years. And over the 20 solid years of sales and sales management experience within the multi-housing arena. She has been nationally recognized by her employers for her professional skill and sales figures, earning her top awards. Lana has always been highly involved with her business on every level with meticulous attention to detail. She takes pride in conducting business on a national level with some of the largest management companies that are in the top 50 by the National Multifamily Housing Council. Lana, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here. Boy, I sound really good on that. So
Morgan, you do.
Whoever wrote that, I'm like, wow.
Well, I'm very impressed. And again, we're very, very grateful to have you today. Such an important topic that we're going to discuss today. Obviously, leasing has changed a lot since the pandemic started last year. We're into like over a year now, and leasing continues to change. Today, we're going to learn how renters want to shop for apartments and what they're looking for the data provided by Yardi. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our first question, Lana. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, Yardi surveyed 3,500 apartment shoppers and asked the question, what would it take to make me feel comfortable during their apartment search? Back then, the answer was more photos and videos on our website so they can do their search better online. Where are people's comfort levels today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think before we can really start attacking the marketing strategies, I think we really need to understand really, where our renter was last year in 2020 and, really where our renter is now in 2021 in order to apply those marketing strategies that we have learned. So let's talk a little bit first about some stats from our survey, if we might. And I kind of need to lose my notes here a little bit because there's a lot of important stats and I don't want to misspeak on any of these. So let me talk about some about the 2020 stats first and what the renter was looking for, a year ago. So we posed the question to our folks out there and asking about, what were they concerned about with their upcoming move? And interestingly enough, 45% of them actually had no concerns at all about their upcoming move. 18% of them, they were concerned if it was safe to move, specific to hygiene and specific to really exposure of the virus. 13% were concerned if they could pay rent or not. Of that, than percentage, 56% of people, of renters, still intended to move, and 28% were looking specifically for a cheaper place to live. So 8%, and only 8%, or maybe I should say, I feel like it's only 8% were postponing their move due to the pandemic back in 2020. So I think the moral of the story is back in 2020, people were still kind of in the mode of, okay, I need to move and I'm still going to follow through with that moving plan. So what it really forced our industry to do was to think out of the box as we're all locked down, how can we still lease our apartments up? How can we still get them fully occupied? And that's what was happening in 2020.
Great. Thank you. Some great stats there. So what do you think renters want now in 2021?
Yeah, so I think they want still what they had before, a little bit of all of that. But now I would say that from our new survey that we did, where we interviewed 10,000 folks now, 50% of those folks still said that the pandemic was a trigger to their move. It really wasn't the main reason because of exposure. It was something as a result of the pandemic is making them move. So for instance, that maybe they were laid off and maybe they now have a new job. And so therefore they need to seek new housing, maybe cheaper house someplace else. Maybe they can work from home now where it didn't afford them that opportunity before. So maybe they're going to broaden their circle, broaden their radius of where they're looking to search. So again, 50% of renters said that pandemic was a trigger in their decision to move. But the thing that I think still is important, that 30% of these people said that at the end of the day, that they are looking for a more affordable place to move to than they were prior. So they're looking for a deal, and some of them, 25% of them, said that they just needed a change of scenery, and that's why they're going to move, that they were stuck at home with their same four walls, and so they wanted a change of scenery. So 25% of people said, I'm moving now. I just need something new and different. 48% of these people, though, said that they're going to stay, living within the same city of that new scenery. And I think I think we get sometimes, at least this one kind of floored me a little bit. I think with all the uncertainty of the pandemic, I was maybe making an assumption that people were into short-term leases, like non-committal, and quite the opposite, Tracy, that 90% of people said that they are looking to make a long-term decision. And I think when we think about long-term leases, what's usually cheaper, your short-term or your long-term leasing? Your long term, right? So I think it's really our industry's opportunity to capitalize on maybe can we offer something even longer than a 12-month lease? Do we offer 15-month leases, 18-month leases? So 90% of the people really are looking for that long-term stability. And I think that financial impact is the driver behind that. So if we can give them a better deal for longer term, I think we really have to capitalize on that. 20% of the people were looking for new amenities, open air amenities. Again, along with the pandemic, they wanted some new things that maybe weren't available before. Rooftop type stuff, perhaps, or just amenities that maybe you, even Tracy, at some of your properties didn't maybe have pre-pandemic, and now you brought more to the outdoors. Maybe you opened up that pickleball court that you didn't have before. And 20% of people just needed more space. Again, maybe that's because they're working from home now and they're tired of having that desk in the bedroom with the unmade bed behind you. So people just want more space as well. I think that the last thing here that I'll quote from a statistics standpoint is that last year, 18% of our respondents were concerned about hygiene and exposure to COVID. And now that statistic has dropped to half, 9% now. So it's not that it's out of mind, it's still there, but I think we're ready to move on with our lives.
Yeah, I know I am. So, and I think it's a combination too of, the state reopening, vaccinations being readily available and things of that nature. So interesting, Lana, the stat that you mentioned on people being more just price conscious and cognizant of like some long-term leases. Do you think that's maybe just the long-term fear of maybe what was going to be happening with their financial situation? I mean, do you think those are related to each other?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I'd say, the verdict is still out on that, but I think that people, are willing to maybe think more long term than they were before, and that's encouraging, I think, for our industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I do know last year, I think myself and a lot of management personnel on this call today probably saw a lot of the same things, to where some people were moving outside of cities, moving kind of relocating to the suburbs, less dense areas where probably they could get out a little bit more and not stuck in their apartment. Are you still seeing that trend?
So I would say last year was the year for people. We saw the influx of, Californians moving, probably to Arizona more so, but we gained some of those folks, that population from there as well, maybe some New Yorkers, so those high dense areas. But now I think from our last survey that is starting to change a little bit, that they're relocating, again, due to the effects of the virus, not per se because of the fear of the exposure, but just because I'm looking for a new job, so it's forcing me to relocate. But 48% of people still want to stay in that same city. So as I mentioned prior, they want, instead of their vanilla walls, they're trading it in for maybe colored walls in a new community down the street a little bit. So they're closing that circle a little bit, that circumference of where they're willing to move. So 48% still want to stay within a close vicinity of where they are today, and I think that's kind of interesting. So that trend has definitely changed.
Yeah. Great information. And we touched a little bit on this last question, Lana, but while Texas is reopened, people are continuing to get vaccinated, but people are still sensitive, to your point. We do see some people that have to wear masks everywhere. Some people feel like they don't need to, right? So from a leasing perspective on how we should approach that in this industry, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, good point. And this is really, the meat and potatoes is probably, why people are showing up to listen to us today, right? Like, what has changed, and is it still going to stick with us? And I think that answer is, I think it's all good stuff, right? When you think about your everyday experience and going to the grocery store, as an example, a few years back, all they offered were employees checking you out, right? You had to go to a checker. And now you go to grocery stores, and more often than not, they're opening up more self-service lanes, right? Something prompted our in that industry to start doing self-service lanes. And that's not going away. And just the same with our industry. What it's forced us to do is think of alternatives to lease. And just because now we're coming out of the pandemic, are those alternatives going to go away? Absolutely not. They're what I term evergreen, right? Like those are here to stay, pandemic or no pandemic. So I think that's the moral of the story, first of all, is I think we did a really good job as an industry thinking out of the box, but those aren't like one and done solutions. They're not leaving. And we just need to embrace what are those solutions and how can we fully incorporate those. So let me talk about some of those that really are important in this day and age. Um, First of all, I will still say your website on your communities is still your number one selling tool, your number one thing in your toolbox. So I call it your digital storefront. So instead of having that brick and mortar location of, Muffin Ridge Apartments, well, you still have that, but now as we're living more in a virtual world, it is that digital store that's there for you 24/7. So it's where your customer is. And just like that brick and mortar store, if you're thinking of, hey, I need to go to the store, you have to talk about your digital store being your store. And so when you think about it that way, you need to think about, well, how can I find my store, first of all? So if you're in a position to go and have hire an SEO company, great. Most of these things you can do yourself. So when it comes to website optimization, doing some Google pay-per-click, those are all key contributors to really just the basics of finding your site, right? So the first thing I want to say is about your website. And again, this isn't pandemic driven. This is just good business. Google has a tool called Lighthouse. And for those of you that have never heard of this, I encourage you to go Google it real quickly. But this isn't a thing that I made up or my company made up. This is a Yardi, I'm sorry, this is a Google tool called Lighthouse. And more and more searches, right? We reached that tipping point a couple of years ago, how more searches are done on mobile platforms than desktop. And so Lighthouse really gives you your performance score. And really, I encourage you to think about, how does your website look on a mobile platform, for sure. And then go to Lighthouse. You can do right click and say inspect, and you can also download a Google extension, and it scores your site, and you can see how well it's performing in a few different KPIs that they have. So I would do that first of all. For everyone on this call, I would do that first and foremost, pandemic or not. Then the next thing I would say that the pandemic did drive was giving multiple tour type options to your consumers. So for example, video tours, right? That's something that's fairly new because of the pandemic. 360 tours, they were there before, right? The ones that move, you can go from room to room. Live video tours. I'm going to hold my phone, and get on FaceTime with someone and walk through the unit. We didn't really do too much of that before. Self-guided tours, something that the single family housing industry really embraced before the pandemic, and we didn't really venture into that space. And I know, we were starting to go there, but the pandemic really, really catapulted that technology there for self-guided tours. And then I would say chatbots really took off for our industry as well. I'd say that we're the number one industry that I'm aware of, that I know of, that's really, really embraced the chatbot technology. So some of those are kind of new, innovations that took off because of the pandemic. I still go back to some legacy ones, though. People, your consumers, still want to see good photos, videos, good content. When you go to your amenities page, hey, just don't tell me about what your amenities, your sparkling pool, your fitness center that's open 24 hours a day. Show me pictures of it. The old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's evergreen too. That's not changing as well. So put pictures, places that you never thought of. For example, if on your website it gives you the ability to have unit level pictures of your vacants, a unit 2203, just don't show me the model of 2203. Show me the actual interior of 2203 with that upgraded stainless steel appliances and that hardwood flooring. That's important. When you think of the sports industry and going to spend $100 on a ticket to, a football game, sites like that even show you what is the view going to be like from that location, right? So now we're spending a chunk of change, probably the biggest chunk of change on our rent every month that we have. Let's give the consumer some of those key things like that by showing them what does that unit look like inside, and then moreover, where is that unit on a map as you go through the online leasing process? Kind of give me that plot on a map of, where's that unit that I'm looking at, and maybe the four others that you also have vacant, that so I can kind of pick my preference. So again, not necessarily a COVID thing, but I think more and more feature rich things that maybe some clients weren't taking advantage of before with their website has really come to light, that they need to do things like that. So the last one, I would also say that scheduling a tour has never been more important than ever, right? Because not all the time were our offices open for business all of the time. We might have been very selective in, yes, we will tour you face to face, but you have to schedule an appointment. Or maybe we're only doing self-guided tours. So schedule a tour functionality. Tracy, have you ever used OpenTable before to go and create a reservation for dining?
Of course, of
Of
course.
course, right? We all have. So if we do that in our personal life, again, if I'm spending the biggest chunk of change every month, I want that same experience. I want that open table like experience. So on your website, try to have a schedule a tour functionality where it's not just, hey, I want to schedule a tour and it gives me a form to fill out that's going to send an email to the on-site staff where they may or may not be in the office. Give me that experience where I can say, Tracy, yeah, I want to schedule the tour tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and maybe you don't even open till 10 o'clock. That doesn't matter. I want to schedule a tour on my own time. So again, give me that type of experience, just like Open Table, where I can help myself be self-service, just like that grocery store experience as well too.
Now, I agree with you, Lana. It's really kind of forced this industry to make some needed changes, in my opinion, and a lot of some things have been very, very successful that I don't think that we'll completely go back to any type of pre-pandemic way of doing things.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So you did bring up a self-guided tours, and I just kind of wanted to get a little more in detail, Lana, with you on what's the best approach to do a self-guided tour.
Yeah. So, I would say it starts with your website, right? And having a link someplace on your website that says, schedule a tour. So that button, that schedule a tour button, which then gives the consumer that ability, as I said, not just a form, but gives them the ability to maybe select the floor plan that they would like to tour, and then gives me a date. Hey, I want to come tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And then that's only part of scheduling a tour, right? Because I think the scary thing in our world in this day and age with online leasing is, okay, so now I'm going to have this person walking on my property potentially, and who is this person, right? And can I trust them? And what am I opening myself up to? So I would highly recommend an ID authentication tool within that online leasing or schedule a tour process as well. So that way, as they're going through and scheduling this tour, they then are taking a biometric selfie, and the solution is verifying that information in order so they can proceed with scheduling a tour. After that step is done, then they'll receive a notification when it's close to their time of the tour that, okay, here is a PIN number perhaps that will get you in the door if you're using a smart lock sort of system that's only good for a set amount of time to get you in the door. And then after you leave, things all lock back up. So there's multiple providers out there, that have this technology in this day and age. And again, I don't think this is going away. The single family industry was doing this for years already, and we just need to get on board with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned chatbots earlier, and I know that virtual tours is, everybody's heard of virtual tours, but chatbots, is a little bit newer, right? And a newer kind of an idea. How do you think that they can add value to our leasing process, and how can we use them effectively?
Yeah. So again, with your virtual store, you need to give your consumer every avenue to ask questions. And whether your staff is there or not to answer those questions is kind of a non-issue. People are doing things self-serve, as I had said already like 1,000 times, right? So let's give them one more tool to ask questions. But when we're thinking about putting a chatbot, make this a conversational tool. Don't put a solution on that can't answer things. I encourage you to enlist a chatbot where you can actually ask questions. You can go to almost every website these days, and a lot of our clients are doing chatbots. And sometimes it's a great experience, and other times it's not. And what I mean by that is, um, can you only set the buttons that it has presented in front of you? Availability is a button, and then when you hit the availability button, it pops back that availability. But what happens when there's a question that's not one of those pre-formulated buttons? Um, we have a concept that I like to talk about, which is NLP, or natural language processing, that gives you the ability to ask a question, even if it's slang or a misspelled word, and the chatbot then can fully answer that question. So maybe, do we have to wear masks when we come for a tour? Can you ask that question on your chatbot? First of all, can you ask any questions on your chatbot? And go and try some of these chatbots and ask questions. And that's one that I make the rounds on websites and just ask, hey, do I have to wear a mask when I go out on tour? And I will get back many times, I don't understand your question. And that's not a great experience for the consumer, right? So make sure that your chatbot is capable of answering these questions, and that perhaps one that you can hire, that you can even train, um, that it hears some of these questions over and over again, and it uses this AI technology, this artificial intelligence technology, where it's learning, it's getting smarter over time, and that you can even behind the scenes on the back end train what these responses should be. So that way, you can go back and forth, and you never have to turn it over to an agent per se. And now your leasing folks can really dedicate their time to higher value tasks rather than answering these simple questions. How much is your deposit? What are your office hours? Do you take pets? These are all questions that our staffs are getting today, right? And they're kind of time sucks, to be honest with you. So now, if we can have the bot be smart enough to answer all of these questions, imagine how much more time, Tracy, your staff can get back to really focus on residents that are living there already, and just higher value tasks.
Absolutely, Lana. You brought up such a great point too on not only having this resource, but making it effective, right? It's got to work properly. So bring up some great things. And a lot of what we're talking about is a very, technical driven. And I know myself as well as other management companies that have, we've tried everything during the pandemic. What works, what doesn't work, but we do still have some properties that have limited resources and some antiquated marketing. So do you have any suggestions specifically for those properties?
I do. And while, yes, technology doesn't come for free, some of the basics that you can do that I spoke of, that I'm still a believer in the foundational aspects. Make your website the best that it can be. Never has your website been more important than it is today. And so content is king. It's an old adage, but it's true. When it comes to Google and their ever-changing, algorithm, it really is driven through relevant content. And that is something that it doesn't matter if you're an A-plus property that has this enormous budget, or if you don't have a budget at all. That's something that's you can control, right? Is let's really make our content really relevant, and let's put a lot of pictures on it, videos. The crawlers really like those videos. They like it when you label pictures and all of that. So just do your research, I guess, when it comes to just the basics of what and run that Lighthouse score. I cannot stress that enough, because Lighthouse will be a great starting point of what you need to work on. I have seen some companies kind of do more, if you call it low tech, but rather than having a self-guided tour that has some smart technology built within it, some folks are just either, number one, they're deciding to leave their models open, which that might not be the safest thing, but if you are on a community where you do feel safe, they're saying, okay, my model is open from this hour to this hour, or before a prospect shows up, they will go and unlock it so they don't have to have physical connection with them, contact with them. So that's an option. Or even the realtor lock boxes that you leave the key inside. So those are more of a lower tech option that can be a little bit more affordable. But I just go back to really optimizing your website yourself, and that doesn't necessarily take a huge amount of money.
Great,
the,
great
the more
advice.
you can do with automation as well. I had talked about the chatbot and things like that, but again, the more that you can take off of your plate as an operator, the best that you can do for yourself, and do yourself favors too.
Absolutely. Some great advice, Lana. Thank you. And I do have one last question for you.
Yeah.
And it has to do with consumer fraud. It seems to have picked up, during the pandemic. What specific measures can we use or can we do to avoid this?
Yeah, you're right. Those bad guys, they're out there, and they are getting smarter and smarter all the time, and they are brave, especially sitting behind a computer, right? Rather than going in person. Fraud happened before, primarily in person, and now almost the opposite. More and more fraud is happening online more than ever before. So I would say, first of all, get yourself a great screening company that can act as that, first layer of protection, right? That you're doing all of the right things there. But as a secondary step to that, and during this online leasing process, have this ID verification, ID authentication tool. We talked about it with the self-guided tours, but whether or not you're doing self-guided tours, it needs to be part of your online leasing process as well. And sometimes, just like, and maybe you have done this, I know I have. I don't have a security system at my house, but I have the little Brinks sign outside in my little flower bed, and that in itself is just a deterrent to the bad guys. So even if you can have such measures like that that scares them off, some people, some entry level criminals, that will scare them off just when they get thrown into that online leasing process, and all of a sudden you have these screens that pop up that they need to take a picture of themselves, and they don't allow you to take a picture of a picture. You actually have to have some movement in there where it does this biometric movement. So I highly encourage, partnering with a solution out there that's doing this to try to keep those bad guys away. Yeah, fraud is not going away. I'm sad to say. Additionally, there's also kind of payroll checks that you can do, paycheck stub validations, and that helps as well, because the more that we can do to really verify that people are real people, they're legitimate people, and they are who they say that they are, the more that it's going to help you get the best type of renter in there as possible. So payroll verification matching is another one. The work number has been around for a very long time. So there's different solutions that work with this agency in incorporating that during the online leasing, and kind of a third tier of the screening process. So yeah, I hate to tell you that I wish ID fraud were kind of simmering down as the pandemic is withering away a little bit, but I think that's evergreen too, unfortunately.
Yeah, I unfortunately agree with you on that, Lana, but I really, really appreciate your insight. Morgan, that's all the questions that I have specifically for Lana. Is there any questions from our viewers today?
No, we do not have any questions at the moment. So guys, this is your opportunity. If you have a question, go ahead and ask it in the chat. But whether you're watching now or later on Facebook or YouTube, please don't hesitate to reach out to me with any questions that you might have for Lana. My email is mtaylor@haaonline.org. I'd be more than happy to pass your questions along.
Happy to answer those too.
Well, great. Well, Lana, we can't thank you enough for taking the time and giving all the valuable information that you have today on our expert exchange. And just wanted to thank everybody for your attendance. And with that, Morgan, do you want to do some closing comments?
Yes. Thank you. A huge thank you to Lana. It was really, really, really great information. I think it'll be extremely helpful to our on-site teams. And thank you again to Tracie for hosting. Please, please, please join us next time, Wednesday, May 19th, when we interview Fidus Construction on a construction update. Until then, make it a great day. Bye.
Great. Bye.